You're listening to the Business Wingmen Show with father and son duo Steve and Travis Smith. Each week we bring you concepts, tips, and ideas to help you show up and be the professional you want to be. Listen in. You'll thank us later. Welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of the Business Wingmen. I am Steve Smith. I'm joined by my co-host Travis Smith. We are the only father and son podcasting duo on the internet today. We're proud of it. We hope you guys get a whole lot of value out of the discussion and the banter that we take everybody through with the topics we select.
Yeehaw!
Yeehaw. All right. So this week we're going to be talking about the art of building team commitment. All right. And so before we launch into this thing, it's probably a good idea to kind of tee it up and make sure everybody knows where we're going with this. So Travis, what do you define as team commitment and why are we talking about this today?
Well, and a lot of times when we refer to commitment, we're talking about making the decision to do something, right? And then seeing it through to the end. Perhaps that's the kind of best way to look at it from a business standpoint.
Right.
But with a team, it's not only just the leader communicating appropriately and getting a message across and perhaps the why behind something, but it's really getting that buy-in. And that phrase or that word buy-in is really what I think we're most likely going to be focusing on for the majority of the conversation today, because that buy-in is what produces the commitment in your ability to get to whatever that end goal is, right?
Yes. Now, okay, so that brings up a really ugly situation that I was in years ago when I started with a new company. And, they introduced me to an established team. Okay. It wasn't like I was there and I hired people on. The team was already there and I'm the one showing up.
Oh, that's
and
fun.
So, you go through the usual, orientation, meeting people, kind of getting to know each other. And I will tell you that in that first probably 30 days, everybody is on their perfect behavior. They're doing things right. They want to look good in front of the new boss. And so, okay, so that's the way it works. What I underestimated, and I shouldn't have because I had been doing this for a while, but I did anyway. We had a huge project that the company wanted us to implement out on the West Coast. And so, we put everything together, we got everything going, I kind of laid out the structure and the timeline and who everybody's duties. The day it was ready to go, nothing happened. And I'm freaking out. I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is supposed to happen. We were supposed to be at a location. We're supposed to have clients there. All this stuff was supposed to go down and nothing happened. And what I found out later on, after we kind of got through the ugliness of it and finally cobbled everybody together and pulled it off, was because I hadn't approached it right early in my career with this company. Nobody was buying what I was doing. So they all just sat back and just decided to wait to see what was going to play out, knowing that it was me against an entire team and the team wasn't going to take a hit for it. They were just going to all sit there and wait to see what I did. And so, and so that was a big learning lesson. It's like, all right, just because I show up and I am the boss on the top of the org chart doesn't mean that the commitment is there.
Gosh, look at you. We're like 2 minutes into this thing and you're just already unveiling the kimono.
Yeah, but I think, look, a lot of people that get promoted into entry-level management or maybe higher up levels where now they've got a larger crew or departments under them, or like me, they move into a new business at a senior level. Nobody really thinks about that because you just think, okay, I've got the authority, I've got the title, everybody knows what I do. You just assume that the commitment is there, and oftentimes it's not.
I love two things that you just brought up. So first one is the title,
right?
And then the second one is the assumption, right? And
yeah.
So, your comment was, I was a new leader. I was brought into a new team. But the funny thing is I see this pretty consistently with people who've been in leadership for years, decades,
right? Yeah.
Which is because I have the title, i.e. the power, I assume people are just going to do what I want and put a freaking nice big old Garfield smile on their face, right, about it. And that's actually not the case.
Right.
So in our discussion today, talking about what are the behaviors leaders can either utilize in the office or the ways that they can operate to gain commitment, whether that's through their actions, through their words, right?
Right.
That's such an important piece because the assumption that people are going to do what you want them to do and do so successfully with a good quality output just because you have the title, that could not be farther from the truth.
Right. Right. So when you're thinking about the idea that, okay, just because I show up and I have a title and I have perceived authority, that everybody's going to follow my lead. And as we've already discussed, that doesn't always happen. What do you think is the driver behind gaining commitment?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, if you look at a sports team, for example, the team, for that ability, for example, in football, for that team to be able to get the ball into the end zone, everybody has to work together to make that happen.
Right.
Right. So if you're on offense, you've got your O line. They've got to stop defense coming in. Right. You got to protect the quarterback. Right.
Right.
Then you've got your wide receivers. You got your running backs, and and everybody else. But that team has to work as a functional unit, all towards the same goal, in order to get the ball into the end zone. Right. It's the same thing in an office. If you have a quarterback, which would be your boss in the office, right? The director, whoever it is that runs that particular department or operation, is setting up a play, is setting up a goal and a strategy, and everybody else on the team is doing something else, what's going to happen?
Oh, I totally get it. But when I look at a team of people, presumably all having maybe slightly different roles, they do different things, but they're together as a team designed to put out a particular product or service or something like that. That team's made up of individuals, and each individual has to come to a point where, if they get to this point, they're going to trust the leader that, and I just, I just blew it.
Yeah, you just gave the answer.
Right. I just gave you the answer. Okay. So that's what it is. It's trust. If I inherently trust the person I'm reporting into, I believe that what they're doing is the right thing. I believe that they have my benefit in mind. They're not going to screw me or do something that's going to hurt me or cause me to, to kind of fall back in my performance or my career. Then I'll trust them. And it means I'll probably follow them through most stuff. Now, of course, along the way, that trust kind of gets built and it changes. But if you don't trust the person you're working with, you might show up and pretend you're doing all the right things. You're kind of living under the radar and just doing what's necessary to do the job for the day and leave. But you're not gonna give them full commitment if you don't trust them.
And I agree wholeheartedly. However, not every situation as a leader are you able to step in with trust already established and then gain commitment. So that's a challenge.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
So, for example, you gave us you opened the kimono and gave us your story a moment ago about you came in, you were the new boss, you made the assumption, right?
Yep.
But when you're coming in as the new boss, trust is not established.
Oh, no.
Those relationships are brand new, just like dating. When you go on a first date, it's not that you distrust the other person, but the purpose of that experience is to learn about them, to decide whether or not there's going to be a second one, and then trust is established over time.
Right.
So the challenge, especially in a new situation at work, is as a leader, how do you gain that commitment, especially if you're brand new, because trust doesn't exist.
Right.
And I would tell you that perhaps two of the biggest areas where a leader in that kind of, I'm new, I'm trying to rally the troops, is absolute transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Transparency over a period of time builds trust.
Yes.
The second thing is, aside from transparency, is when you say something, you better freaking do it.
Well, yeah, that's the integrity part behind it. Yes.
Right. So, but I also look at that as action. So, for example, in my past, where I have seen leaders not only say something, they do it, but then they get down into the weeds and they help the team. They become part of the team, right?
Right.
So they're basically showing, hey, I'm not worried, or I don't have a problem rolling up my sleeves and getting dirty.
Right.
That builds respect. So between trust, like you mentioned, being transparent, communicating, and then respect, those are the things that will ultimately build that kind of cohesive unit, which ultimately then brings in commitment.
Right. Okay.
It's just, unfortunately, that takes forever to happen.
All right. So all right. That's a perfect lead in. So I'll give you chapter 2 of the story that I started with, because, in my 30 years in consumer products, I'd worked for 4 really, really good companies, well-established leaders in their marketplace. So when I went to the next company, because the one that I kind of gave you the example of, at some point they were acquired, and everybody left. And so the next company I went to, I was in the same situation. Okay, coming in kind of in a higher level role, established team already there, and I looked at all that and I said, okay, I've been here before. It's like Austin Powers, when he puts his little finger to his lips there and he goes, I've been here before.
Stop that.
So I looked around, I thought, okay, what mistake did I make the first time? The first time, the mistake I made was early on, I didn't reach out and try to establish an individual initial rapport and the beginnings of a relationship with each person on the team. Now, because the geography, that required me hopping on a plane and doing a lot of travel early on, which I was more than happy to do, because I figured out that if I did that, met the person in their location, in their market where they were controlling things, and learned about what they were doing and understood, their background in the company, and then let them ask questions of me, what were my philosophies, and, what did I think, and why did I come here, and all this kind of stuff. You spend a day with them. When you're done, the relationship's still going to develop over time, but now you've got something to start with. So now when you say, okay, guys, we have got to do something about this particular situation, now you've got people's attention. They're a little more willing to buy in because they feel like they know you on a personal level.
Well, and as you start to build those relationships, like you've pointed out, some of the things that I've seen leaders do in the past that have really kind of propelled those relationships quickly is, you'll see them advocate for the team. So they'll go out of their way to do something to help the team,
right?
And or to maybe recognize someone for their performance, right?
Yes.
Those are moments where we're, as a leader, putting ourselves aside and we're giving someone else the stage.
Yes.
Right? That's such a powerful move. But the key piece is it has to be genuine, right? Yes. Because it's really weird. It's like a stinky cologne. It's like people can smell the BS when it's not done genuinely, right?
But I will also tell you that when you're advocating for your team, the best time to do that, especially if you're moving up in the ranks of the company you're with, or you're moving to another company, like the examples I threw out there, usually within the first 90 days, that's the best time to advocate. Because people at the top that brought you in, not only do they want you to help mobilize and make the team that you're looking at better in some way, shape, or form, but they're also recognizing that they probably don't know all of what's going on at the ground level. And you coming forward and saying, okay, guys, I've been here, I've looked at all this stuff, I've met with everybody, here's some serious problems that I think we need to address. They're going to listen to you at that moment, because you're still coming in with an outside perspective. You haven't been completely, culturized to the organization, good, bad, or indifferent. You're still looking at it like somebody who has just stepped in and said, okay, this is what I see. What are we going to do about it? So I find that that's the best time to try to get some small things done, because people are more willing to listen to you then than if you bring that up 2 years after you've been in the job.
Boy, and how polished and diplomatic you're being this morning, talking about executive leadership, knowing what's going on the ground floor. I mean, in my experience, humbling myself over the past 16 years here, very few times have I seen executive leadership know the ins and outs of what goes on the ground floor.
No, they don't.
So to your point, as the new leader coming in, or even if you're just the current leader, you've been there for a while, advocating for your team and trying to put them in a situation where, for example, like in our industry here, there's a lot of tools that are used. So on the design side for engineering, they're using CAD tools like SolidWorks and so forth. If it's a more of a PMO situation, they're using tools like Agile and stuff like that. And,
right.
And these are all just tools that help make the job more efficient, or on the CAD side, to do it all. But the thing is, a lot of times the tools either aren't updated or they're not used correctly.
Right.
And then that hinders the team's performance.
Right.
So one of the things that I've seen leaders do, especially if they're coming in new, is they very quickly refresh the system. So they refresh processes, they refresh the tools, right? And what that does is it almost just kind of elevates the performance of the team without necessarily reinventing the wheel.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden it's easier for people to do their job.
Yes. Okay. And the way you've described it is probably more the current day approach to refreshing and reestablishing how to do things. Back when I was doing this, what we used to refer to it as removing obstacles. Because over time, with various management people coming in and taking over, it's like the government. You just kind of heap regulation and law on top of stuff. And then after a while, people just don't feel like they can operate smoothly anymore because they have too many hoops to jump through.
Right.
And so if you can remove those hoops, remove those obstacles, and give people the ability to be successful in whatever role they have easier, that's a massive way of creating pretty quick trust. I mean, when people say, wow, they went to bat for me and got rid of this crazy ass rule that we've been operating with, so now we can do what we do faster, better, cheaper. Yeah. You're selling yourself.
And the commitment piece, gaining people's commitment by removing those bureaucracies and the red tape. It's so funny because it seems so small, but the reality is that people, most people, I would say, or some people, they like their job. So if we can make their job easier and not so much, it's like the checks and balances systems that get put into place, like you've mentioned,
right?
That really hinders people's spirits when they come into work.
Right.
So that alone, if you want to gain commitment from someone, make their job easier. I love that.
Yes. All right. So we've been talking a little bit here now about people that either rise up to new positions of authority, and maybe they have new people now that are reporting to them, or as in my case, moving into a company at that level and kind of starting fresh with an existing team. What would you say to leaders or department managers who have been in their role for a while, 4, 5, 6 years, and they're struggling to get people to buy in, maybe on a consistent basis? Maybe there's always a question as to whether the team is going to accept what they're telling them they have to do. And so in the back of the person's mind, they're always thinking, gee, I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell them, meaning my own team, on doing that. What would you tell somebody who's kind of developed the reputation of not always getting the team to follow? How would you help them turn that around?
That's tough too, because a fair amount of the time I've noticed that whether they're willing to admit it or not, the leaders know that. They've built a reputation for not only being able to get the troops aligned, right? But it's kind of like they say one thing and then everybody else does the other.
Right.
And as a result, the confidence of that leader kind of gets smashed in a way, to the point where they just stop trying.
Right.
Which is a big issue. So I think the first thing that I would say is, we've talked about this before, is I think his name is Dr. John Cotter. He has the change management model. It's like an eight-step model that he utilizes. But the reason I bring that up is because one of those steps pretty early on in the change management process is to identify someone on the team who is a primary support mechanism for whatever it is you're doing.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And that person basically becomes your internal champion. And what you're doing there is you're going to that individual, and this individual does need to be someone who has relationships established. Perhaps they even have the ability to sway things, right? So they have some kind of grit and not necessarily authority, but just people will listen to them, right?
Yes. They're an influencer. Yes. Exactly.
So this individual, this influencer, by establishing that kind of relationship, my advice would be to people who, they've just kind of been in this status quo of like doing the same thing over and over again, but they realize they now need to change it. Get an influencer on your side and make sure that that person is being crystal clear with you about what the situation is.
Yes.
You really have to understand exactly what you're dealing with. And you don't want a lot of yes men and women on the team that are just kind of telling you what you want to hear, but that's not actually the reality. And that's, I really believe that's the first hurdle, is you have to know what you're dealing with in order to then change it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is so key. And you're right. There's usually somebody on the team that you're overseeing that plays that role. They may not have been identified as such by the rest of the team, but individually, everybody knows, gee, if you want to know how to do something, or if you have an issue and you don't know what, go talk to him. We may not trust the boss yet, but go talk to him. And so if you can figure out who that is, in fact, with the company that I outlined in my first example, I found out who that was. And he was a tremendous help, not only in helping me understand the culture of the team and why people did certain things that just seemed self-destructive, but he was also good at talking to these other people and kind of interpreting what I was trying to get across in language that they understood to bridge that gap. So yeah, I think it's a masterful thing to do, early on. And even if you're trying to change up, an existing management style that hasn't worked well, find that person.
So I actually have a short story of this exact situation playing out rather early in my career. So I was out of college about 3 years. I was working for a company. I was kind of new into management, maybe a year and a half in. And there was a different division of our operation that was struggling. And the director at that time came to me and said, "Hey, we need someone to come and move over into this division, kind of rewrite the ship. It's probably going to take the better part of a year or two to do that. It's a good opportunity, though, long term. Is this something you're interested in?" I don't know if you remember this. I actually called you and I was like, "Oh my God, this seems amazing, but how I don't know anything about this particular division or how it operates. Like, how am I going to do this?"
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Long story short, I took that opportunity. And the reason I'm sharing this story is because the guy who was in the job, whose job I actually kind of took,
Right.
he ended up becoming my employee. Thankfully, I had a good
Oh,
relationship with him.
right.
His name's Jason Ross. And if by chance Jason's listening right now, I'm so thankful for his support thereafter, because what ended up
Mm,
happening was everybody loves Jason. This guy, like, he's really mellow. He's a good worker, good head on his shoulders. But what ended up happening was I was the new guy on the block, but I was kind of like the de facto boss at this point.
mm,
But he was my right hand person, not only helping me to get up to speed with the division and the technicalities of the way that it operated,
right.
but when things came up where I was trying to push something or get the team rolling on a new clip or a new strategy, he
Hmm.
was right there by my side, kind of being like, "Yeah, guys, this is what we need to do." And I cannot begin to tell you how helpful that was, not only in my transition as a new leader on that team, but the team already trusted him, already knew what he was about. So if I said something and he supported that, the team didn't ask another question.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that's a great example of kind of hitching yourself to someone who's already established trust and influence that may not be in the leadership role, but they're a great conduit to helping you bridge that trust gap between you and the new team that you're overseeing.
Well, in that situation, I mean, now that in hindsight, I mean, that taught me so much about not just being in leadership, but the importance of acknowledging the difference amongst not necessarily titles, but just years of experience, what people can bring to the table, right? And
Right.
it's really important not to box people into kind of, square holes, right? And what Jason offered to me, and again, I'm just so thankful that he was there to help provide that transition, and he was a great friend during that time,
Hmm.
was um, it allowed our division to become successful much quicker than if I had been doing it by myself.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And,
Good.
and that has opened my eyes to the importance of not only having a team, but if you're leading something, having somebody else beside you that can sing the same tune so that you're not doing it from an island.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to hitchhike on what you just said, especially about the thing of the team becoming, better at what they do faster. Okay. One of the things I believe is a huge element to gaining team and individual team member commitment is raising the standards. Okay. And you can't do this day one. You have to, people have to know you, they have to trust you. You have to have some working dynamics between you for a while. But when teams feel inherently like they're mediocre, like they're not really providing value to the larger company, um, even the best people will eventually sit back. And if people are driven to want to be their best and they just don't see the environment ever producing it, they're the ones that leave, you know?
Well, but
So,
wait, I'm I'm so glad you brought that up. But why do they leave?
well, they leave because they don't see any way for themselves or the team that they're working with to really shine and to really, really do things at a great level. And they just get tired of waiting for things to change. So they go looking for a better team.
Spot on. I mean, if I'm an A+ player, right? I'm the best at what I do. Do I want to be surrounded by a bunch of people who are just kind of mailing it in, barely getting things done?
Right.
No, because that's demotivating.
Yes, that's exactly right. So if you want to really, really take, the establishment of good commitment at some level and take it up a couple notches, the best thing you can do is figure out what everybody needs from a development standpoint that's going to take them from where they are to maybe top level performance in that. Because who knows, that could, depending on the job you're in, if you're sales, it could be more money. If you're in some internal environment, it could be a promotion. So you've got to help people take their own selves up and let them know that the team collectively is going to start operating at a higher level. Because deep down inside, most everybody wants to belong to a well thought of team, a team that's got respect because they get things done. Other people look to them as like the shining star of this is the way it's supposed to be. Most people want to be part of that group. They don't want to be on the outside looking in.
Well, LinkedIn did a study back in it was 2018 or so. It was kind of like a workplace learning report that they did. And the outcome of that report indicated that it was something like 94% of employees would stay with a company longer if that company was investing in them in their development. I mean, I think about that outcome, 94%.
Right.
That's pretty close to saying everyone you make the investment in to develop them, whether that's enhancing their skills or helping them improve in something that they struggle with.
Right.
The majority of the time, that's going to lean towards them staying with the company, being empowered, being more committed, right?
Right.
That's a huge opportunity, employee development.
Yeah. No, look, I think if the average person on any team realizes that there's opportunities for them to improve, if they feel like they have a megaphone to their boss or to people that are in decision-making roles, so it doesn't mean everything they tell them is going to get done. It just means their ideas are being heard, their concerns are being considered. If you do that, and you're working for somebody who has developed integrity and transparency, and you really know what they're trying to do and how they view themselves and the team collectively, commitment is just going to show up. Now, again, it's not going to show up the first 30 days. And if you've got a team that's kind of dysfunctional and people don't trust each other, it could take the better part of 6 to 9 months or more to turn that around. But as the leader who's trying to figure out how to change all this, you've got to have those things stacked up like a formula.
Well, you used the word dysfunction a moment ago. I mean, sometimes I swear when I'm out meeting with clients or just from my experiences working with other leaders in the past, it just seems like some leaders love to swim in dysfunction. You ever notice that? It's like they see it, but it just everywhere they go, it's like the black cloud of dysfunction follows them.
All right, so
ultimately, which drags down commitment, and I just never understood that.
I'm dealing with a company now, and I'm not going to tell you what industry they're in or certainly the name, but I will tell you.
Oh, come on.
No, the CEO of this company, and everybody will tell you right off the bat, he's a genuinely good guy. Okay. But when he kind of morphs in his head into I'm the CEO, there's two principles he operates by. One, if I can keep people competing with each other, that's a good thing because they're always going to try to do their best because, there's the winner and a loser. And so he creates that competition, which ends up usually being conflict. And the second thing is I always want people to know that I'm in charge. So if it means I've got to step in and do something that nobody likes, but I have to legislate the outcome, that's fine by me. And what he doesn't realize is that he could get a better outcome if he just got people together and said, okay, we have a problem. What do you guys think? But he doesn't look at it as the strength of the CEO. He has to legislate everything. So with those two things right there, he's one of these guys that you talk about that just has it's like, what is it? Is it Linus? Who's the Peanuts character that's always walking around with the dust clouds around him?
The dirty kid.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the dirty kid in his company. And it's funny because everybody else sees it. He's the only one that can't acknowledge it.
Well, in part of your story right there, you talked about the solution of just kind of opening up and talking with the team about, here's what I'm seeing.
Right.
What are we going to do about it? So I want to comment on that real quick, because that is that is not an easy thing to do.
No.
That takes a lot of managerial courage to put yourself in front of your own team as the leader and basically say, I don't know everything, and there are parts of the way that I'm running the ship that perhaps are not beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
The act of being transparent like that is a huge proponent to commitment.
Right.
Because when you basically, as you had done, early on here, open up the kimono,
right,
and say, I'm willing to be honest about who I am and my contributions here. And by the way, I want your help in figuring out a solution to that.
Right.
I mean, if every leader just did that alone, we would have companies that would flourish, rather than being in the shit cloud of dysfunction.
Right. Well, but that comes with having a lot of inner confidence in your ability to manage relationships with people.
Absolutely.
And if you can do that, and you're confident in that, then you can be transparent about what you don't know or what you're not sure about, and you will actually engender people to you. People will want to help because they realize you're not trying to run a game on them and try to get them to do stuff that they know deep down inside it never worked. It didn't work last time. It's not going to work now. So yeah, you really got to be honest and open about those kinds of things if you're going to build commitment. All right. So as we finish this thing out, is there one thing that you can think of that you would tell everybody listening and watching today that we haven't talked about that you think is a real pivotal behavior to adopt to build trust and to gain commitment? Is there anything that we haven't talked about that's on your head that you want to throw out now?
That we haven't talked about. I mean, geez, we've covered.
Oh, I have one. I have one. So I'm throwing it out to you first.
Yeah, I've got nothing. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There's some transparency for you.
I've seen this happen over and over and over again, and in fact, I was guilty of it myself. And the guy I was working for at the time basically served it up this way. He goes, in every situation where you have to provide direction to your team, he goes, you have to own your message. And what he meant by that was that frequently you're not the top of the list. You're not the CEO, the owner of the company. You're at some point in that operational level of management. Okay. And something might come down from the top that you have to deliver to your team that you don't buy into. All right. You really don't believe it. And maybe your team isn't going to believe it either. So you're sitting there thinking, okay, if I go in there and tell them to do this, that they're going to crap all over me because I know that's not the right way to do it. And he said, what you have to do is you have to take that message and you have to sit down and you have to make it your own and figure out how to serve it up so that, you don't walk in there and say, guys, I hate this. I don't want to do this, but they're making me do it. So I'm telling you, you have to do it. He goes,
have you ever seen somebody do that?
Oh yeah.
I have.
Yes. You can't do that. You have to take whatever time is necessary, whatever time you have, and sit down and say, how do I craft this message so that there's integrity behind it, even if it's an ugly message to have to serve up?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have actually seen that in real life play out on more than one occasion.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing more diminishing, nothing more, it's like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to be telling you this.
Right.
And by the way, hopefully you're just going to listen and do what the executives need us to do.
Right.
Poor executives, we're always ripping on them.
Depending on what kind of relationship you have with people upstairs of you, that's a perfect time to advocate for your team and say, guys, I hope you realize this is not going to go over well because we have been here before and they already know what's going to come out. So help me figure out how we can make a success out of this. And if you have the right relationship and credibility with people above you, they'll listen to you. They may have to, change things up or do something to help put the team in a position of success so that when you deliver the message, people aren't ready, are running for the door.
Right. I love that. As we've been talking today and we kind of look to wrap this up, and one of the things that I still believe, and we've talked about a lot today, a lot of different approaches, I still believe that it comes back to the relationship and the trust that you build with a team. And so much of that has to do with the command of your message, like you just mentioned, owning it, and then actually doing something about it, right?
Right. Right.
getting down in the weeds, supporting your team, right? I know we're oversimplifying this topic, but at the end of the day, you know what it really just kind of boils down to? You just got to give a shit about your team. You got to care.
Right.
If you don't care as a leader, all of this stuff will unravel as it's happening.
Right. Yeah, you're right. I mean, because people will sense that. They may not be able to actually put their finger on it, but they will sense that you're not there for the betterment of the team and the company you're working for. You're just using that as a stepping stone for your next promotion. And that never works. All right, folks, listen, thanks for being with us today. We hope you got some really good insight into the whole idea of building commitment in your team, especially if you're struggling with that now, because that is an ugly place as a manager with a lot of authority and no backing to be, and you don't want to be there. So try some of the things we talked about. Believe me, between myself and my son, we have done a lot of this stuff. We've made a lot of mistakes, but we figured out what works. So most of what we talked about today will work if you just figure out how to make it work for you in your particular situation. So thanks for being here today. If you want to listen to some of our episodes on audio, you can go to businesswingmen.com. That's our home site with all of our archive shows, or you can go to any of the podcast stations that you like to listen to, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcast, whatever it is you normally listen to, type in Business Wingmen and you'll find us. If you like these particular shows that we're now doing on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and you'll get notification every time a new one comes up each week. So thanks for being with us. Travis, any sign-offs before we go?
Happy to be your wingman.
Happy to be your wingman. Yeah, we'll be each other's wingman. Hopefully we're being wingmen for the people that are watching. All right, folks, we'll talk to you next week. Have a good one.